Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Tired and Thriving, a podcast recognizing just how tired and exhausted we all are while discussing ways to still thrive. I'm your host, Samantha Gray, and this week's guest is Tommy Lei. Tommy is an award-winning intuitive fine art and commercial photographer with his work collected internationally. Thank you for sharing time with me, Tommy.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Sam. And I am tired and thriving. So I can't wait to get into this conversation with you.
So, starting
Mhm.
off, did you always know you wanted to be a photographer, or what was that journey like for you?
So I actually spent almost a decade of my life in various professions. So I didn't really quite know that I was ready for photography. I somehow what happened was I'd always had a camera with me, so I was documenting things like every day in my life, but I didn't really see it as a profession because I always just saw it as a hobby.
Mm.
Um, but what really ended up happening was I started my career in marketing and I was working at MTV in New York. Worked on the very first season of RuPaul's Drag Race, and I was doing social media for that first season.
You're like, gasp.
It's such an iconic job, honestly. Like, I got to meet RuPaul in person. He came by the offices quite a bit. But I even got to see like some of the behind the scenes and how they filmed the show. That was incredible. But I graduated from college, and then I then decided, okay, maybe it's time for me to come back to LA. So
Mm.
around like 2013, I decided to make the mass migration from New York City back to Los Angeles, where I grew up. And I had a hard time. I was kind of struggling to find jobs at the time. Um, and in fact, the very first job I found was through Craigslist. I did
Mm.
copywriting for a boutique condom company out in, I think, Hacienda Heights or Roland Heights.
Yeah.
I know it was such a little, like, scrappy little team that I worked with. And it's a life experience for sure. But I knew that wasn't the end all and be all for me. So I was like, okay, Tommy, you have to like reconsider everything in your life. What is it that you want to do?
Mm.
So then I made another detour. I decided to jump into PR. So I started working at Weber Shandwick, which is this huge juggernaut of a PR firm. We represented so many crazy clients, a lot of corporate names that you might have heard of, like PepsiCo, Mattel, and like
Mm.
CK Foods, who owns Carl's Jr. And I even did some translation work for the army at one point. That was another one of our accounts. Like it was nuts.
What?
That's all I can say. It was
Yeah.
one of the toughest jobs I've ever had. I was literally in the trenches every day, and I wasn't happy. So this kind of leads to that next big hurdle, which is my uh, my foray into blogging. So I
Mm.
started a blog that year, and I started to document uh, my life, so to speak, but from a more fashion perspective. So I was like I was using my camera a lot, and I really fell in love with just capturing like really mundane, like sort of unseen moments in my everyday life. And I think that's where that love of photography really spurred in me. Was it became a creative outlet, but it also sort of was a mirrored reflection of what I was going through at the time, which was a lot of like turmoil, a lot of uncertainty. And I think I just found a lot of healing through photography and through
Mm.
producing images that really spoke to me. So in a way, it's a very I came into it like pretty selfishly because it's something that really allowed me to feel seen and feel healed by. And so yeah, that's what kind of propelled me into photography. But yeah, prior to that, I've had so many different jobs. I've held so many different titles, like so to speak, from being a fashion lifestyle blogger to becoming, just more home decor and interior. I can't even pronounce it. Interior designer. Wait, that was like such a tongue twister. So yeah, I pretty much jumped from so many different professions and platforms, and finally coming back home to photography.
Mm.
And it's been a very long-winded but meaningful journey, because I've seen, I've seen so much of the world because of my blog. I was able to travel so much,
Oh,
and I think that
wow.
also gave my photography practice more depth and more dimension. Um, and it's really allowed me to see things from a different perspective. But yeah, for me, photography really comes down to being a very personal reflection of who I am. Like each image I produce, I feel like kind of mirrors my own, insecurity or vulnerability. But against all that is like this backdrop of healing and hope. And yeah, that's what I love about it.
I want to just touch up on like how did the blog allow you to travel around the world?
So, because I was documenting my life through a fashion lens, it really caught the attention of a few outlets at the time. Like, so I was featured on Refinery 29, Women's Wear
Oh,
Daily.
wow.
And it was because of my unique take on menswear at the
Mhm.
time. And not a lot of bloggers were tackling, the arena of menswear, so to speak. I felt like a lot of people were just used to seeing, very suited, very sartorial, like timeless, like menswear outfits, like something that's very safe. But I
Yeah.
wasn't doing that. I was a bit more avant garde. I was a bit more gender fluid before gender fluidity was even a thing. Like I
Mhm.
remember like talking about like men in skirts. Obviously I wasn't the first person to do it. I know so many people have done it. Like, I think about David Bowie being like someone that is very gender fluid. But yeah, but it was new at the time. It was novel. And so it caught the attention of these outlets. And then from there, I grew a following of very loyal readers who are interested in also wearing clothes, wearing menswear the
Mm.
same way I was doing it. So then like, from that exposure, it led to brands like, wanting to collaborate and work with me. And so some of these brands would fly me out for like menswear fashion week
Oh,
in
wow.
Milan and Paris. And then I did a lot of New York fashion weeks as well. And I did both women's and men's because of, my gender fluid take on
Yeah.
menswear. and
Mhm.
and at the time I was very skinny. I was able to wear a lot of gosh, I felt like I went through a second puberty, but essentially I was able to fit into all these amazing clothes because I was very slim. So I did incorporate a lot of women's wear. In fact,
Mm.
something I'm wearing right now, this is my
Oh.
grandmother's corduroy
Oh,
jacket.
that's
So
very sweet.
yeah, and it still fits me. Thank goodness. But anyway, so yeah, that's what led to all those travels. It was like fashion weeks, and then because I was documenting so much my travels at that point, other tourism boards also started taking notice, and so
Oh,
they also
wow.
wanted to like fly me out and experience like different countries and different experiences. Like I did this like amazing like eco-friendly trip out to Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. And then I
Mm.
also was invited to attend like Copenhagen Fashion Week, Stockholm Fashion Week. So I was spending a lot of time not here in the States, but I was traveling the world. It was incredible because it
Yeah.
just really, I really valued the moments where I was able to be somewhere else, because it really opened up my eyes to like how other people live,
Mhm.
like you can read so much about a certain country, but until you step into their shoes, so to speak, like you wouldn't really know how other people lived. And
Yeah.
it was just riveting
Yeah,
to
that's
be
such a
able to experience
unique
all that. Yeah.
yeah, such a unique experience to have. Not a lot of people get that. But then how did you transition from going to a blogger? Like, what was the moment
Mm.
where you started
Hmm.
advertising your photography more and stepping away from like the blog?
Well, it took way too long for me to even start sharing it. I was so afraid. Gosh, like, people love to pigeonhole you. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of one of the most downsides to being a content creator or being a blogger is that your audience doesn't want you to basically, move beyond your lane.
Yeah.
They want you to stay in your lane as much as possible because they're so familiar with you as this person and that they don't want to accept another part of you. And that unfortunately led me to kind of holding back on sharing a lot of my fine art photography. I felt really just insecure about the whole situation, which
Mm.
is ironic because a lot of my photography is focused on those really unseen moments of insecurity or vulnerability. But yeah, so what ultimately happened was during the pandemic, peak pandemic, I just started rummaging through all of my archives, like my entire body of work. And then I was like, okay, there is no time but today. Like there's
Mm.
never a right time, you know? You can
Mm-hmm.
rationalize all you want, but you have to listen to what your heart wants and what your heart desires. And so I was like, for a lack of a better term, fuck it. I was like, let's do this. And I went for it. I was like, I just started to share. I started to re-educate my audience and to really let them know that, guys, I love home decor, I love interior design, I love fashion, I love making cocktails. Okay, I love all of that, but deep down, this is who I really am.
Mm.
Um, and I think it took some time for people to kind of wrap around this idea of me, like, oh wow, like you're a photographer now or you're an artist now. Like it's still something I'm wrestling with internally. I feel like there's so much room for me to, constantly improve my own practice and improve my way of storytelling through my photography. But, I think if I didn't do it, if I just kept holding back and not embark on this path, I would never know,
Yeah.
and I feel like I just want anyone like who's listening right now, like if you're feeling like you're in that weird space, and a lot of it will, be very gray and very like amorphous and ambiguous around you. Like I just want you to feel like, okay, there's never a right time to really fully focus on what you want to do unless you do it.
Mm.
It only gets better when you actively share your work because otherwise no one will know. And that's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like I feel like the people who do care will always support you, and the ones that don't, like eventually they'll just start to fade away into obscurity. And
Yeah.
the fact that you're so worried about that tiny percentage of people or that little just voice in your head telling you like no, like you're not good enough or this is impossible, like everyone's not going to love your work. Yeah, just don't let that hinder you. That's a very, like, I feel like to me that's a very personal struggle, and like I've gone through it, I'm still going through it. It never fully goes
Mm.
away, but it's just something you have to grow to be comfortable with.
Yeah.
That it's always going to be, somewhere there lurking in the shadows, like ready to like pounce on you again. And but you only get better if you put your work out there and you really put yourself aside. Like it's your ego that's stopping you. You have to like push that aside and
Yeah.
just, you know, put yourself out there.
What
I
was
know
that
it's sounds simpler. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Hmm.
no, I'm sorry to like
No, 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 no.
interrupt you.
That's fine.
But
Yeah.
I just
Hmm.
I got hung up on the idea that, when you're transitioning or even
Mm,
showing your true self, there's that moment of, like you said, people dropping away. Was there a
mm,
moment that somebody who dropped away that you were really sad about that, was like, "Oh, I'm not really into who you're showing right now." And they just like leave your life, or
mm.
it was there ever a moment like that for you where it took it like hit you hard to be like, "Oh, I didn't realize that." this person or these people would leave me for this.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. I think it's part of the process when you are shedding away a former self. You are going to lose friends, you're going to lose like connections. And, for me, it was a combination of like losses. Like, I did lose, some, I did lose quite a bit of like my following, which I felt like just really had no direct impact on me because I really feel that at the end of the day, I'm here to cultivate a community.
Mhm.
And if you don't really believe in my work and you don't fully support it, that's okay. Like it's a very silent departure,
Yeah.
which I love. Not to say that I don't value my audience, I do, but I just think that, everyone has a choice. You're
Yeah.
not bounded here for whatever reason.
Mm.
But I think that the parts that are very like hard hitting, I think would have to be like losing like some professional connections,
Mm. Mhm.
because they really have been longtime collaborators, and then now you sort of like have pull the rug underneath them in a way, and so they're like not sure how to work with you like moving forward.
Mm.
And so I've had some professional losses.
Yeah.
And then there are, you know it's part of the process. I really believe in, that when you're shedding a layer of who you formerly are, you're going to lose friends too, inevitably. And that's also really hard. You're going to have, friends that might now see you as competition in a way, because
Oh,
they were like, well,
wow.
I didn't know that you were going to do this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've been iced out a little bit. There's no hard feelings. I feel like, again, this is just a natural progression of things. Um, I feel like, just in anything in life, like you just have to learn how to let go. And I think in that transition, I had to I had to unlearn a lot of things, like unlearning attachment, unlearning, um, this is getting really deep, sorry.
I know.
Unlearning attachment, and then unlearning um, just trivial surface feelings.
Yeah.
I'm not to say that your feelings don't matter, but I think it's really it's very fleeting. Those like that sort of initial pain that you feel shouldn't have to define your whole entire journey and experience, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, there are definitely some losses, but I also think it was for the better.
Yeah.
I say that with such like a little bit of uncertainty because it's different for everybody,
Of course.
but I do really believe at the core it's gotten better
Yeah.
because of just the life and professional lessons I've received from making this big transition.
Yeah.
um but yeah, just because there are all these variables, like I don't think that should stop you or anyone else from pursuing what they truly love.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so because loss is such a big thing for all of us. But
Hmm.
obviously having letting go of the loss, and I like what you said about yeah, just that letting go, that unattachment. Like I feel there's so many times in my life where it's that thing where you're just like
Hmm.
it feels like your stomach's dropping out of you and you want to like not have it drop and you're doing everything possible to keep your stomach in, but
Hmm.
ultimately like you're going to have to let it go. It's kind of a gross analogy.
It's not, and actually that's the perfect analogy for people pleasing,
Mm, mhm.
because you're holding yourself back, you're holding your needs back and your real self back because you don't want to hurt or disappoint someone.
Yeah.
That is such a real thing. Like, and that was something I really had to unlearn, was the people pleasing.
Yeah.
Because what do the more you do it, the less you're doing something for yourself.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So let's talk about, okay, so we just talked about the loss, but what benefits came out of like coming out and, you know, being your most
The
authentic
upsides,
self?
the upsides have
Yeah.
been the upsides have been tremendous. I think the first thing was just feeling very liberated. Like it's no longer this secret that I have to hold on to. And it's
Mm,
also like you let go of so much of the shame that's inherent to being like an artist or being a photographer. Like you're pursuing something that's maybe not conventionally stable in a
yeah.
lot of ways, right? And it also definitely goes against all of my immigrant parents' beliefs of like what I should be doing. But no, it's super liberating. That's the first upside. The second for me was just how many people really do genuinely love my work. And that was the
Mm,
shocking part. Like I
mhm.
really I had no ego going into this. Like this is just a part of me that I want to share and I really wanted to like have this be my full-time profession. And so when people were coming around and saying like, "Oh my gosh, like why did it take you so long to do this? I've always wanted to collect something from you."
Oh,
And
wow.
that was really life-changing for me to see that some of my readers that I've had were like, "I followed you since my belonging." That's what my blog was called.
Mhm.
Um and they were like, "Oh my gosh, like I love this piece. I want to come to your show." And like a few people actually did and came and collected work. So I think that
Wow.
was like the very sort of life shattering thing was like, oh my gosh, like had I not done this, I would have never known. You
Yeah.
know, there are people who truly believe in you, like outside of your family and friends and your loved ones and your acquaintances and professional peoples that you know. Like there are people
Mhm.
who genuinely believe in you. And you wouldn't know that unless you tried, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that was something that really hit me hard. And so, yeah, I would say that like the upside is outweighs all of the losses that incurred along the way.
Mhm.
Um, and I just, I just think back, like, how, like, I always had told, myself and other people, like other friends of mine, like, oh, carpe diem, seize the moment, but it took me so many decades of my own personal and professional life to embrace that.
Yeah.
So yeah, just seizing the moment itself is a lifelong journey and
Mhm.
no regrets, as I can say.
Yeah. I think it's really beautiful that you had readers and viewers that already saw that in you and were just like, I'm so glad that you came out to express that most authentic person. Like
Hmm.
that they even were like coming to see your show and wanted to get your work and be like, I've been waiting for this.
Right. Yeah, and that was the most spectacular part. And I will always treasure that feeling. It's like a different level of high, like
Mm,
you really feel so fulfilled that other people also feel seen in your work,
yeah.
and I think that's what is so powerful about photography or art in general is that,
Mhm.
through your own vulnerability, other people are feeling recognized and feeling seen and appreciated in their own ways.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of beauty in that, um, and value.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Well, um okay, now getting into your photography more because we
Mhm.
just talked so much about, like, the feelings and getting
Yeah, the
into
feelings,
it.
yes, and the journey getting there. Yeah, it's
So, do you usually
Mhm.
plan where you are going to take your photos, or does it come to you when you see it or feel it?
Mm. It's very spontaneous.
Oh, okay.
That's a big part of my practice is that nothing is manipulated or nothing is like kind of staged professionally. And there are
Mm,
so many different branches of photography. And so I think that's why I call myself more of an intuitive fine art photographer in that I'm not like staging sets, I'm not manipulating the lighting, I'm not telling my subjects how to pose. Like I
yeah.
wouldn't walk through a street and see something I want to capture and be like, okay, guys, I'm going to orchestrate this moment. Can you please sit here? Can you please hold this paper up this way? Or, you know what I mean? Like
Mm,
I'm not
mhm.
telling people what to do. I want to capture, if I'm capturing people in their natural element. Um, and the same goes for my landscape photography. Like everything is unmanipulated. It's not, I'm not trying to
Staged
recreate
or
moments.
mhm.
Yeah, I'm not trying to recreate moments. I'm trying to just let what I see in front of me tell the story.
Yeah.
And that's what compels me to capture what I capture. So yeah, it's a lot of it is spontaneous, and I've had some really really incredible moments that I'm so thankful for. And that's why like I feel like, you know, especially for photographers, like it's so important to like just keep observing, keep taking in the world around you, because even if it's like a daily walk in your neighborhood, like I'm talking about like just even on a side small street, you'll be
Yeah.
amazed by how many hidden things or vignettes or moments that really unfold. And I think that's what, you know, makes photography such an interesting practice, because it really sort of crystallizes those moments,
Mm.
and it gives it, you know, life and longevity.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, do you like how many shots do you usually take when you find that right moment? And then how long does it
Mm.
take to sift through the photos to find the one that you feel like is the best of the work?
Hmm. Ooh, this is a tough one to answer because there's so many layers to this, right? Like, because when I
Mhm.
first started, like when I was really like kind of exploring what my voice is and what my style is, I think I was taking over like 1,000 photos on a
Oh, wow.
given, like, you know, trip or stroll or walk, what have you. It was, I felt like I was very like green in that sense. Like I didn't know what I was trying to say yet, you know? And I think that
Mhm.
happens a lot in those early stages of your journey, as any creative or artist can relate to, right? So I would say in the present, like nowadays, like I don't even go over like 100 shots.
Wow.
Like
Mhm.
I treat every shot like I'm shooting on film or something.
Mm.
So I shoot digitally, and I do think like for a lot of film photographers out there, what they love is the restraint that you
Yeah.
have to get the best shot possible. And so I'm trying to incorporate or trying to apply those principles in my, you know, in my capturing of photography, is that I'm limiting myself. Like if I see something but it's not 100% of what I want to shoot, I won't do it because it's just
Mm.
noise. And then you kind of, and you know, when you sit down and edit through all those pictures, you begin to feel very overwhelmed and inundated, and then I feel like you start to lose like, okay, what am I even trying to say here? Like what is the
Yeah.
message? What is the narrative?
Mhm.
So it's actually really important for me now that I limit myself. I don't just like, you know, just because it's digital and you can take as many shots as you want, you know, I really try to just be uh, a bit more conservative about the amount of shots I take. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really helps when it comes to the editing process. I'm not sitting there for hours,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm
Absolutely.
really just getting the best of the best. Hmm.
I love that you said that because there's a famous artist,
Mm,
and I feel like it happens. Oh my gosh, I wish I remembered his name, but he's
that's
known for
okay.
being really simplistic with his drawings, and he did
Mm,
a lot of like celebrity caricatures and everything, and it's just like a single line basically, like very
a
not a lot of
single
lines.
line. Hmm.
Yeah. He actually was the one who did the genie in Aladdin. And, like, cause
Oh, really?
the genie's lines
Hmm.
are so fluid that they
Right,
hired this
right.
man to, like, get that form down,
Still one of my
and
favorite Disney characters.
oh my gosh, so
Ugh,
good.
iconic. Seriously. I just love Genie.
But, you know, a lot of people are like, "What's so great about his work?" Or they would say things that are like, "Well, he doesn't use a lot of lines, you know, how can that be
Hmm.
considered art?" And it's
Mm,
just the
mm.
fact that, like, you have worked so much to be able to make that line come to life and to give everything you need. but it took like thousands of hours of drawing. And it feels like that's exactly what you're saying with your photography. Like as a novice, you had to take these 10,000 photos. And then,
Right.
but now that you have more of an eye, now that you've honed your craft, you only need 100 in that like sitting. And I feel like that's just art across the board. And I feel that just shows the professional nature and expertise that you have.
I wholeheartedly agree. No, it's definitely something that I treasure like every shot I've taken, right? Like so to speak, because it aided me to becoming the artist that I am today. So without those like tens and thousands of shots that were just maybe not so significant, like I wouldn't know what I would be capturing now,
Mhm.
So yes, there's such like I think there's such a misconception when people think about art. Sometimes they think the more complicated works are by nature or by definition more valuable,
Yeah.
but I myself have always loved like the more I don't want to say minimalist because there's so many like artists out there that have had like different mediums that and different ways of expressing themselves. But yeah, I think of like there's an Italian artist. Oh gosh, like now I'm like kind of like forgetting the name, but what he does is he started off as a sculptor, I believe,
Mm.
but then he moved his practice into like canvas or steel even, and he would just like do a big slash in the middle. It looks like something's
Whoa.
like opening. It's like really fascinating. Lucio, is it Lucio Fon? Oh gosh, I have to Google. Sorry.
Okay, if you're gonna Google him, I'm gonna Google the
Oh
other
yeah, I'm
guy.
right. Lucio Fontana on the Threshold. That is, I have that coffee book. So Lucio Fontana is this, yeah. So he's went through so many variations of his work to arrive at this one stylistic way of expressing himself. And I think it's kind of like a lot of it mirrors like your own growth as a person. You're
Mhm.
shedding all these layers, and at the very end you're like, this is me, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
And there's so much power in that, and just knowing like concretely that this is what I want to say with my work.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I just want to throw in that that
Okay. Yes.
caricature artist is Al
Uh-huh.
Hirschfield.
Oh, okay. I thought okay, that sounds so familiar. Like, yeah, for sure. Al Hirsch. Yes, that's awesome. Well, and then another artist I want to throw in there is Ruth Asawa, and like someone who again does
Mm.
very sculptural works, like,
Yeah.
but then, still is known for their sculptural works, but then has sort of moved into mediums that are also very, kind of I want to say deconstructed,
Yeah.
like even looking at Georgia O'Keeffe's work, like body of work
Mm.
over the
Mhm.
years, like when she's in her later stages of being an artist, it's very like simplified abstractions and just very fluid, but it says a
Yeah.
lot. Um, and I think it's also kind of like, once you've learned the box and what's inside of it, you create your own box.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, I
Absolutely.
think that's also another way of looking at it. But yeah, like
Mhm.
it's so fascinating seeing all these artist journeys that have come before and how they arrived at this practice, or at their current, state.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
Well, you described your art style as creating beauty within the chaos. Where did you find that influence, and how do you feel that comes out in your work?
Oh my gosh. Um, so I think like when I felt like a reoccurring theme in my work is this sort of feeling of serenity, even though there is like that inner turmoil and vulnerability. But I think when we're at our most vulnerable, we are at peace with ourselves. And
Mm.
I think that's what I wanted my work to illustrate, that even if we are surrounded with so many of life's like chaotic moments and just sort of the daily hurdles of our own like internal chaos, all the mental quagmires, all the psychosis that we put ourselves through. I wanted my work to just kind of remind us to be present, to
Mm,
appreciate those glimmers of serenity and tranquility that we can find in our everyday life. Um, I feel like when I think about what the definition of that is too, like in some of my recent works, is there's a piece where I'm sorry, like I have so many where I'm thinking of like in this theme, but
of
there's
course.
one of just like I think the koi like swimming, on top of
Mm,
each other. And I was like, okay, like I don't know, I just wanted to capture that, and also that singular koi that was just like kind of finding its own rhythm. And I think sometimes like, we get so lost in the noise. Like we get so lost, like we get so caught up in the doom scrolling. We get so caught up in just sort of
mhm.
like, the talking ourselves down in our heads. And yet like, these koi, they're just like swimming to their own rhythm.
Yeah.
And even though they're on top of each other, maybe there wasn't so much room to move in the pond, but they still feel like they're finding their way. And I feel like a lot of my work is like about like sort of just finding that rhythm and finding that path for yourself.
Mhm.
There's another piece like in my next collection, which is called Infrared Dreams, um, which is you see this like very non-linear path ahead, and the piece is called The Path Ahead. And I just love how like some parts of it was obscured because again, like it's a
Mm,
reminder that like there's no straightforward path to anywhere,
yeah.
in life. And I think it's all about finding your own way. It's all about finding what works for you. And so I want to say like a lot of my work really corresponds with that finding of identity, finding peace, finding serenity, like even in the midst of all this chaos that is happening all around you. Because we ultimately cannot control what is occurring around
Mhm.
us. What we can control is our internal state of mind, how we respond to those chaotic moments or stimuli. So I really believe in the power of just creating beauty in the chaos.
Ugh, beautiful. I
Thank
like
you.
that.
Thank you.
As an immigrant from Hong Kong that now lives in
Hmm.
Los Angeles, how did that merging influence of two worlds influence who you are in your art style to what it is today?
Mm. I would say there's a definite influence in the way I sort of move about and capture my photography. I feel like coming from Hong Kong, like it's such a densely populated city. And
Mhm.
I just sort of imagine if I were a photographer there or I was doing my practice there, I, would never, go up to someone and tell them how to pose or run up to them and force them to take a photo, even when they don't want to be photographed. I think I have a little bit more restraint and boundaries in that sense.
Mm,
I know that there are a lot of photographers that are very well known for capturing people's like unexpected reactions. Bruce Gilden is known for that in
mhm.
particular. His whole body of work is like making sure that he's using a big flash in front of you and literally going up to your face and just like, like
Oh my
it feels
gosh.
assaulting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know. Anyway, so and again, I'm not like disrespecting his practice. I feel like this is just my way of doing things, right? But it comes a lot from that sort of personal space, humility, that, stems from being raised in Hong Kong is that even though it's
Mm,
so densely populated, everyone, deserves space, deserves privacy.
yeah.
Um, so I feel like a lot of times when I do capture human subjects on the street or just in my environment, they're obscured
Mm,
somewhat, or they're not really like it's not like face to face, like it's not like they're facing my camera lens kind of
Yeah.
photography. So yeah, I would say there's a definite influence there. And then I would say, like, being exposed to some of the great, painters and masters in the Western world, like Edward Hopper. That's a really big
Mm.
influence of mine too in my work. So you see a lot of like kind of very panned scenes where it's like kind of you see a lot of kind of stark emptiness at times, like that sort of negative space, like, really helps kind of make the compositions feel almost as if you're also staring into the scene yourself, or you're like stepping into it yourself. There was a particular photo that I captured, I believe, back in 2019 in Helsinki, of just these two women sharing a meal together. They're related. I think it was like a
Mm.
grandmother with her daughter, and how I captured it was very Hopper-esque. And the person who actually ended up collecting that photo, just really loved it because it reminded, you know, her of the time that she had spent with her own mother.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And that was such a, yeah, I know. It was like it's so the title of that piece is called For Our Grandmothers. And I think,
Mm.
like, we just, like, I personally had a very intimate relationship with my grandmother. Um, and I really valued the time that we spent together. So then when I saw that happening, it was just kind of like, wow, that's such a powerful moment. Like, we all have grandmothers, or we all came from a grandmother.
Yeah.
We all have grandmothers, mothers, and so it's just a very maternal moment. And yeah, so I would say, like, a lot of my work is both influenced by like these Western painters, but also like a very Hong Kong humility when
Mm.
it
Yeah.
comes to like approaching my work. And I do think those two things really balance each other out. Because again, I
Mhm.
want to capture people in their most natural element, but also not in their worst elements, like not like trying to get a reaction out of them.
Yeah.
It's more about like, this is how they live their life. And this is how these two women were living their lives in that moment. They were sharing a meal together. They were, in conversation, but also, just it was such a warm, delightful, you know, moment that occurred. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that you were able to capture that.
Thank you.
Well, as much as your work is beautiful, serene, and aesthetique, is there
Hmm.
anything about photography that makes you tired?
Ooh. Um, yes. So I answer that with so much certainty because I feel like being an artist doesn't mean you're turned on like 24/7, that you live and breathe
Yeah.
artistry, right? Like, you're human at the end. That's your first job. You are first and foremost like a human being. You need downtime. You have moments where you're just feeling like, okay, this is not quite working.
Mhm.
And I think when I hit a roadblock, like a creative roadblock, and I don't know what I'm trying to say, I just know that's the time for me to just sit back and disengage and come back
Mm.
to the work later.
Yeah.
Um, there is a great book, and I'm pretty sure everyone knows about it. um, but I just want to make sure I have the title correct. So it's by Rick Rubin. He's an
Ooh.
American record producer, but he
Mhm.
wrote this amazing book called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And I am so, so glad I picked up this copy finally. I'm still going through the
Mm.
book. So I'm really learning as I'm reading. But something that he really pointed out was that, your greatest works could be completed in 5 seconds, or, or something that takes much, much, much longer.
Mm.
And basically that's just saying that, like, it doesn't matter what the time frame is. It matters more about where you are consciously with your work, right? Like, you
Yeah.
don't want to just keep adding on to things just because you feel like, oh no, this is not complete. But sometimes your first draft is your best draft. And I'm like, that
Mm.
hit me hard. That was like, yo, that's so true. There are times when I've tried so hard to capture something. I was like, why is this not working? And then I go back and I was like, wait, that first shot was magical.
Mm.
Because overthinking is the antithesis of creating. Sorry. I just really wanted to say that out loud. And in my head, I said it so much more eloquently. But
Don't
it's,
we
yeah,
all?
but when you're creating, you're in the moment.
Mhm.
So I want, I think that's like something I really want more out of my own practice, is that I'm not forcing these things to happen, but more so like I'm doing this in the moment. This is
Yeah.
what I love to do. So when it becomes something you're not loving so much in the moment, that's a really good cue for you to just put everything down, just relax, breathe, meditate, whatever
Mm.
gets you just more disengaged, disconnected, I mean, whatever that is, do that. Because the more you're trying to force something to happen because it's not happening, it's not bending to your will, the more you're going to get frustrated. And I think the more likely you're going to end up with something you're not happy with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. And so, in addition to that book, I also would recommend Wabi Sabi, um, not just as a practice, but as the book itself. And I'm getting the author's name right now. Um, oh wait, oh my god, I've read this book like twice now, and I'm so sorry that I'm having trouble finding the author's name. But
Wait,
it's
it's called
I just want to make sure that I have
Wabi
it
Sabi or
correct.
Bobby
It's
Sabi?
called Wabi Sabi, but
Wabi Sabi.
there's so many different Wabi Sabi books. There's This one is the
Mm.
definitive one. This one is the one that I would recommend anyone to purchase right now. It's like it's it's sometimes in my bedroom
Oh.
because it is so important for me to read before I go back to sleep. And then like I revisit this often. It's a short book. It's like, okay, sorry, I got it finally. Wabi
Oh,
Sabi,
nice.
The Wisdom in Imperfection by Nobuo Suzuki. I was just blown
Mm.
away. I was like, this book I would gladly get for any of my friends who are just like kind of struggling to live life in the present and put it in their little, um, stocking stuffers for Christmas. And it's groundbreaking. And you could get it like, it's so cheap too. It's like, I think like no more than like $12, like as a hardcover book,
Mhm.
or 14, whatever. But like you can get it on your Kindle, you can, just read it whenever. You can just like bookmark. What I like to do with my books is that I bookmark every page that I want to go back and revisit.
Yeah.
And this book has just completely changed how I approach my life. It's just living in impermanence. Nothing you
Mm.
do now will ever be something you can just carry with you forever. Like just the act of detachment in a way, but in a way that feels very humane and very natural. But like, oh gosh, like, see, I'm trying not to try too hard here with this, evidently. But really, the message is just imagine that everything tomorrow could just go away.
Mhm.
That's how I would approach my work. Just imagine just being so attached to something, so like with so much of your finite energy, and then having it all go away, because it will. And it's really, it's just a very powerful book because it draws so many analogies from like nature, and how it just reminds us of how fleeting everything is, how temporal everything is. It's nothing ever
Yeah.
lasts, but guess what, like it comes back with or without you.
Mhm.
So just think about that when you're creating work, and when you are making something happen, like, or trying to get to that next stage of your career, right? Like, we get so caught up in those very sort of trivial moments of getting there that we forget to
Yeah.
live. And I think that's also important, for my own artistic practice, is that I cannot get so attached to it. Like, what if one day it doesn't work out? So be it. I
Mhm.
still got to live that part of my life, but I have to be willing to detach myself from it. And I think that has tremendously improved how I create my collections and how I can't
Mhm.
obsess over my work too much, or
Yeah.
how I can't obsess over like the time I spent over it. Like it's like, there's no amount of hours you can put into a work to make it better. There's only your intuition and how willing you are to be not overly attached to your work.
Yeah.
If
Whew.
that makes sense. I know it can be
Whew.
counterintuitive for some people listening. I get it, but it's like it's honestly it's helped me so much just by taking a step back and just letting the work kind of inform itself.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it happen. Like, there are paintings out there that you literally would not know that it's a first draft. Like someone's
Mhm.
best idea was literally their first attempt because they weren't
Mhm.
overthinking it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, just everything you said is also just so instrumental in life as well, because I feel like that's
Mm.
been kind of my big lesson this past year, especially being
Mm.
unemployed, where
Mm-hmm.
I like before being unemployed, before all the strikes and everything, I really
Yeah,
thought like, this is it. This is like my career. I've built it up so much. I put so much into this. Like, this is the end game. This is going to be smooth and I can like retire after this, right? Like, I can just keep
absolutely.
directing, I can just stay in animation. And then this huge shift happens, and suddenly you're thrown into uncertainty. And we go back to that feeling of like our stomach dropping out from under us. The whole like, again, just talking about that detachment and being like, I was so attached to this idea and I'm scrambling to hang on. But then, really, like, and, going through my yoga practice, all of this has really
Mm-hmm.
been so helpful in shifting my mind and being like, okay, I really need to let go of these attachments to make way for these new things. Because, like you said, with nature and in life, things
Mm-hmm.
aren't gonna stay. Things are always growing, changing, shifting, like to make
Absolutely.
way for something new. So, just how are you going to move with it? And are you going to just try and stand still and try and be like a rock that breaks? Or are you going to like move with that momentum and shift and change with it, So,
Precisely. Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it's exactly that. And it's taken what, 35 years of my life to to learn,
same.
or to even scratch that surface on top of it. Like I feel like I'm still not there, which is why like it's a book that or it's a principle that I'm
Yeah.
revisiting constantly.
Hmm.
Um and
Yeah. Cause
it's yeah, no, it's so powerful.
it's so easy to say it too, but yeah,
Mm,
having
mhm.
to relearn that lesson and kind of just being like, okay, I have to keep remembering that this is something that needs to happen. Because like you said, 35 years, you that's a lot to undo for 35 years. Like, undoing 35 years of, being a rock that whole time, and you're like, okay, I have to
Yes.
let it crumble to build something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very for lack of a better word, it's like an enormous task, right? Like I think this is the daily homework that we
Mhm.
have to do for ourselves. It's a hard exercise. It doesn't come easily. And in a lot of ways, I felt like the pandemic really hardened a lot of us. It kind of made us feel even more tightened up and more wound up than ever before. Like if we weren't
Mhm.
feeling that way before already, we definitely felt that way during the pandemic because with so many things were regimented. So many things were kind of like, you had to do this to get
Yeah.
through this, right? So I think a lot of us like still have this lingering fear of an attachment toward, what can I do to make myself feel more safe?
Mhm.
And sometimes the safest thing you could do is to let it go.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I feel
Excuse me, I'm
like
sorry.
it all good.
Yeah.
I feel like we're the kid that feels like we're drowning, and then somebody has to, like, pick us up or be like, "Put your feet down," and then we just, like, stand up. It's like a shallow
Oh
pool.
my god, that's so true.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
am that person. It's hard for me to float in a pool. I'm so terrible at it. And oh my gosh, that's actually a really great metaphor for that whole process. It's really just about, yeah, like, so imagine yourself in a swimming pool and your feet are firmly planted. But in order for you to really float and elevate to that next level, to that transcendence, you have to let go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Woo.
Well, is there anything recently or in the past couple years,
hmm
that's helped you thrive and really feel passionate and reinvigorated other than photography?
Mm. Well, it's really, I have to say, like, gosh, there's so many things actually, but I want to kind of boil it down to a few good ones. Other than the
Mhm.
wabi sabi and a creative act, I would say it's really opening up to my loved ones.
Mm,
Really giving. My parents, they don't speak any English,
mm,
and I still speak my native tongue, which is Cantonese. And I think some of the biggest breakthroughs I've had with them was just really reconnecting with them through
mm,
their love language. And my mom's primary love language is giving me a ton of food, like cooking a ton of food, like sharing a ton of food. And I've had to embrace that. Like, it's taken me, again, decades to really come to terms with the fact that there'll never be the type of parent that I see in media, right? Like in Western media in particular, or read in Western books. Like, this is who they are. Like, there's a generational difference.
yeah,
And so I would say that was one of the biggest things that have tremendously improved my life. And, prior to that, like, our relationship, it was decent, it was good. Like, we talked, but it was always very, like, strained.
mhm,
And sometimes there would be like communication roadblocks. So, and I know that I'm not alone going through that. Like, I know a lot of like my other immigrant children friends like go through that. Sometimes it's just, I feel like I think it is all one big misunderstanding. Like, at the end of the
yeah,
day, they truly do love you, but they may love you in a way that is not receptive for you, that doesn't resonate with you. So that was a big lesson, but it was a much needed lesson for me to like embrace, and for me to really find um, that freedom in my everyday life again. Again, that detachment, that like maybe like you don't know everything
mm,
about how
mhm,
to communicate. You have to like put your ego aside and just, you know, let the people in your life tell you who they are.
yeah,
Because if your walls are so up and you're just building more walls to make yourself feel more protected, more validated, I think that's real loneliness. Like, I
mm,
often like hear a lot of people say like, oh, like, oh, I'm never lonely because I'm always surrounded by friends. I'm always like, doing something. But I really truly think by reconnecting with the people who are pivotal in our lives, like that we can't live without, that's when you experience breakthroughs. But
mhm.
obviously, not everyone has that chance or opportunity. So, big disclaimer there. This is my own personal experience, but no, it's definitely something I'm going to look back fondly upon, that I decided to just set myself aside and really just love them the way they are.
Yeah, yeah.
hmm
That acceptance, I mean, we've heard so much about how, like, um the way you learn to love is through your parents, and of
Oh, oh,
course,
yes.
yeah. And then of course, like, when you're working through that, in a sense, that generational trauma on your own, and there's such an easy out to kind of like blame your parents or be like, why couldn't they just figure it
Mm,
out? And I think,
mhm,
like you said, they're just trying their best with what they had, and like that
mhm.
acceptance and that putting down your ego to have that understanding of them without trying to be like, well, you need to change too. You need to like
Right.
get on my level, or,
Mhm.
I think that's really important to hear. I'm glad that's
Yeah.
like
I mean, it
really
was definitely
helping
a
you.
struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
It was
not
definitely a
easy.
struggle getting there. Like, trying to meet them where they are was already a big struggle, and
Yeah.
then, but I felt like I really wanted to do it because I can then say I did it, and if
Hmm.
it didn't work out, then I can at least tell myself that, well, I put forth, I took the initiative and
Absolutely.
really tried to mend the relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the vein of funsies, is there a random animal
Mhm.
fact you can tell me?
Ooh, like, wait, animal facts, like, about myself, or, like,
No, just like any
or,
animal
like,
fact.
oh,
Like, okay, can I tell you one though?
oh,
Because I've been
yeah,
holding on to
sure.
it
I need an
since.
example. I need an example, yeah.
Okay, so
Sorry.
it's all good. It's all good. I mean, I've been like
Yep.
wanting to say this earlier. So when you talked about the koi, it reminded me that there's this
Mhm, sorry. Yep.
my mom and
Mhm.
I were watching this Japanese TV show, and
Mm.
it was this show where they were just like had all these games to, it's like some kind of variety show. And
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love those
one of
variety
the
shows. They're great.
well, one of the games was they were like, here are these two koi fish. One
Mm.
is worth $1 million. The other
Mhm.
is worth like $100,000. Can you tell the
Oh.
difference between $1 million koi fish and $100,000 koi fish?
Oh,
And
that's
so you're
tough.
like looking at it, you're just like, I guess it's the
The gold
pattern,
one.
like the what?
The gold one.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, that weighs more. That's more value. Yeah.
And it was just interesting because they were both like the white with the red
Ah.
speckles on it. One of them had
Oh,
like a
shit. They
black
really put the
outline.
clincher in. Okay, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
okay.
So, yeah, they weren't making
Mhm.
it like, "Here's these
They
2
made that
different
really
colors."
hard. Yes.
And so I looked at the one with the
Mhm.
black line around it, and it looked like ink. So I was like, "Oh, maybe that looks more expensive to me." So I chose that one.
You're onto something. Yeah.
But
Mhm.
then they were like, "No, this other one is actually more expensive." And the reason is because it moves so slowly,
Oh.
and so you get to admire it more, and so that's what makes a koi fish so much more expensive, is
Oh
like
my god,
the way
stop.
it moves. Yeah. And it
Wait, so
felt very
okay,
like
that's crazy because wavelength, that the koi that was captured for my piece called Wavelength,
Uh-huh.
that was a very slow moving koi. That's why I was able to capture it. I was like, "Ooh, okay."
You're like,
But
"They got some
also but
money."
also, like but also isn't it such a good reminder that sometimes when you create more value if you move slowly through life? Like, I feel like we're often given the opposite perspective of, like, overnight success, right? Of,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
just, "Oh my gosh, like, you have to keep hustling, you have to keep grinding." And I'm like, "Yes, those things are important, like, but you have to grind and you have to hustle in the right ways that are meaningful to you, I think." Um, but if you just do it blindly, then you're not giving anyone value, especially yourself. So anyway, that's
Mm.
a really good sort of tie-in with what we were saying earlier.
I know,
Okay, so
yeah.
okay, interesting animal fact. Okay. Ooh, oh gosh, I'm trying not to think of it in like from my photography's perspective. Like I'm
I
trying to
mean,
think
it could
about like,
be from your photography's
yeah.
perspective. That'd be pretty cool.
But I'm trying to think of something that's like really like crazy cool that I haven't talked about in a moment. Like, goodness, like this is really, I'm diving deep into the archives right now. I'm like, when, oh, okay, this is a good one, actually. Okay, so I was at the Arcadia Arboretum where they
Ooh,
have a
okay.
ton of peacocks,
Mhm.
right? And I did not know that peacocks, the male ones, they attack their own reflections. So when I was walking through the parking lot, poor car, there was a poor red car that was getting massively attacked and scratched because it's so reflective. I was like, "Oh, then maybe it doesn't pay to have that kind of coating." It was just going. I thought for some reason like was something was did someone antagonize it? Did the car like antagonize it? I was like, and then I
Yeah.
learned that day that peacocks think it's another peacock because they're defending their territory,
Oh my
the male ones.
gosh.
So they were attacking this reflection. And I was like, wait, isn't this such a good metaphor of imagined competition and
Mm,
so-called, enemies or the enemy that you think is like, or a villain in your own life? Like a lot of that could be imagined, I think.
yeah,
I was
absolutely.
like, because you see a threat and you think that threat is really real, but it turns out it's just a reflection of who you are. And I was like,
Yeah.
ooh, that is such a good reminder of like life again. I was like, poor car, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
Also, speaking of metaphors,
yeah,
the fact that
that's
it was a red
yeah,
car, like, red for anger and for,
yeah,
like, such passion and emotion, and it was just, like, attacking
yes,
it.
yes.
What?
Oh, okay.
That
Look at
was
us. Look at us like peeling beneath these layers and really getting deep. No, but seriously though, I was like, wow, like, okay, that's another life lesson.
yeah.
Sorry for the person who owns the car, but
I know.
you're gonna come back and it's all scratched up. It
You were
had
like,
this
"It was
nice
fair."
gloss, like the I think it was like a was it a Camaro? No, it's like a Corvette.
Oh my gosh.
It was like a
Yeah.
very red Corvette, and I was like, "Oh gosh, sorry, dude. RIP."
Yeah. Let's hope you
Oof.
don't notice. Like, I don't know.
I mean, who are you gonna call? Like, this peacock is attacking my car right there.
Oh my gosh. How
Yeah,
crazy.
fun
That's
times, fun
yeah.
times. Yeah. Yeah,
Well, as
nature just reminds us all
yeah,
of, yeah, teaching us important lessons.
definitely.
Yes.
As part of the
Mhm.
show, I'd like to pull out a tarot card for the episode if you're down.
Sure. I love a good tarot card reading. Let's go
Cool.
for it. Yeah.
And I'm using my Aquarian tarot deck, and
Mm.
I'm just going to be shuffling, and you just focus on that, and you just tell me when to
Mm.
stop. Oh my
Mm.
gosh.
Okay, you can stop.
Let's see. Ooh,
Mm.
I just got this card recently. Interesting.
Oh.
So the Knight of Swords, but it's reversed.
Ooh. Am I stabbing myself?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. I'm gonna pull up,
Mhm.
which is so funny because I was like, I need more night cards, like just to read more.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. I'm curious to know what this means for me.
mhm. Me too. Let's
Yeah.
find out. Okay. So, oh, oh, okay.
Oh, oh,
Oh,
oh, shit. Okay. Wait, is that a bad one? Like, is that, oh my God. Don't get me all
uh,
worked up.
no, it was just really funny because I feel like we kind of talked about it where
Yeah.
like so even though you
Mm,
have been doing your goals and have been charging forward and doing
mm,
what you love,
mhm,
in reverse it's kind of like, hey, maybe you're burning out and maybe you need to like take a rest, like there's some
mm.
unfocused energy, there's just restlessness, so
Yes.
um,
Yes.
kinda taking that step back
Oh
because 'cause
my
you've
God, this is
been
so
charging
accurate.
forward. I know, that's why I was
This is
like
so accurate. You know what? I mean, I don't wanna like prolong like, too much of your time, but it's so crazy because I was recently in another sort of like informal Zoom with an artist friend. And
Mhm.
one thing she mentioned to me was she was like, I feel like you're in thrash right now.
In thrash?
And what that mean like in thrash, like THRASH. thrash.
Uh-huh.
It's I know it's the first time I was like kind of learning about that term.
Yeah.
And I mean, I understand what thrash means, but she's like, it's like feeling like you need to keep going forward in a way that may not be so mindful. You know,
Mm,
like you're kind of like grasping at straws, like it's almost like that, you know. And I do
yeah.
feel that way sometimes. Like I'm like, okay, you know, I'm building these collections and I'm trying to put my work out there. I'm doing more of it and doing more exhibitions. But I think it's also like I've been, you know, again, like just kind of like taking a step back and just reevaluating where I am now. And like, is this really, am I putting my work in the right places? Am I really connecting or collaborating with like-minded people? You know, I think about that. So I do feel like maybe it is saying that yes, you are on the right path, but you might be doing a little too much of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, there's
Yeah.
a bit of restlessness, bit of,
Mhm.
like, yeah, your
Yes.
mind's just spread too thin, going, like, too many places, and the unfocusedness of it. So,
Yeah,
time to come back, setting that mindful focus again to be able to really complete your
exactly.
goals. So,
Mhm.
oh,
Yes.
wow,
Oh my god, that was such a good card. It's the right
powerful.
card to pull. I was like, wait, I was just imagining you kind of sifting through the cards and I was like, okay, just stop. I was like, yeah. Yep. But
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, what energy the cards pick up to, like,
yes.
bring the
Yes.
message that we need.
Even across like the screens. I mean, I know we're in the
Mhm.
same, you know, state, same city, same county, but still it's like, you know, the energy is like, you know, even kind of transmitting through the screen. It's like
Yeah.
so three body problem of us. Oh my gosh. That show is really terrifying, by the
Which
way.
one is it?
Three body problem?
I've never heard of that.
Wait.
Oh, no.
Oh, girl, no. You're going to have another show to binge tonight. It's based off of a novel by Liu Cixin. Cixin. I think he's based in, I want to say Beijing or somewhere in northern China. But
Oh
anyway,
my
like
gosh.
it's a great show that they readapted. So they already have the show in China. You know,
Yeah.
they have it, right? But then, you know, Netflix was like, okay, we're going to buy the rights for the Western distribution. So they did their
Ooh.
own adaptation and it's so good. You okay, a lot of what we touched upon really could, you know, you can find some of those messages in this series as well.
Mm.
It's
Mhm.
very powerful. But yeah,
Oh my
highly
gosh.
recommended. But very terrifying
Ugh.
because it's like it feels very real. Like
Yeah.
this could happen.
Do you
Yeah. Mhm.
do you recommend the book or just, like, the TV series?
I haven't read the book yet. I kind of like see this is my problem. Oh my gosh, we can have another podcast about this. Seriously, I actually like to just consume some of the adaptations, and if I find that really good, I might just end up reading the book.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of that actually. Like I read from scratch recently. I read Little Fires Everywhere. Great
Mm.
show. Also, Celeste Ng is one of my collectors, by the way.
Mm.
Shout out to her. She collected one of my Hong Kong street prints.
Shut
She's
up.
lovely. Anyway, so yeah, I like watching sometimes the show first, and I'm like, okay, I really do want to read the book, and it's a different experience because they don't touch upon everything.
Yeah.
It's a very abridged, like what you get from a show is going to be abridged. It's a very
Mhm.
like compressed version of the book. So I'd say to people who always feel like, oh my God, like the book is better than the show. I'm like, I agree with that sometimes, but I also agree that the show gives the primary source of material exposure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ugh. Well, we are at the end. Thank you so much, Tommy, for being here and talking with
Yeah.
me. Is there anything you want to promote and tell listeners where to keep up with your latest work or
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I love to, you know, kind of just share a lot of my recent work on my website. So you guys
Mhm.
can like check out some of my recent and existing collections on www.tommylei.com. And you can also then subscribe to my newsletter because that's the only time I share with my subscribers that work is available to be collected
Oh,
because I like to
wow.
keep it very intimate. I like to kind of, give some reverence to the whole collecting process. And I like that, like, I keep this little kind of community going that's even smaller than what you would see on my Instagram.
Mhm.
So I really encourage like anyone who wants to follow my work to subscribe to my newsletter. But if you want something a little bit more like fun and more like, still see my work, but maybe just from a very like kind of, I'm interested, but not quite sure if I want to collect, you can absolutely just follow me on Instagram at Tommy Lei. Sorry, at Tommy.Lei. Sorry, because someone
Mm.
else took Tommy Lei already. So at Tommy.Lei on Instagram. I should be the first thing that pops up though if you do search for me, but there's no guarantees, right? Because there's
Yeah.
always somebody else. But yeah, just a very great way to, DM me with your questions or anything about, the creative process. I'm an open book. I don't like to gatekeep anything. Like, I really don't like that. And I swear by that. I'm all about uplifting others and the community. Like, anyone who feels like they're not seen, like, please come forward. Let's grow
Mm.
and, nurture each other. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, just checking out his work, it's so beautiful. So
You're the
I'm,
sweetest. Thank you.
I mean, it's just truth. So I hope to one day be able to collect something. I better sign up for that newsletter.
Yes, please. And it's actually the most accessible way to get a piece of my work because it's more of a limited edition print release rather than the originals. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good
Yeah.
to know. Well, sadly, we are at the end of the first season. Oh my goodness. Um, I'm going to be taking some time off to focus on my new full time job and finishing up my teacher training. So, hopefully, once I finish my teacher training, I won't be gone that long. But I'm just trying to figure out also what the next steps are going to be for this podcast, who I can also get on the show. If anybody out there has recommendations, you want me to interview someone, please let me know. I have, if you've listened to other episodes, there's my email, tiredandthriving@gmail.com. Always willing to listen and hear what people have to say, as well as to hear any new updates when I come back. Please follow and subscribe on Spotify, on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, whatever you listen to. And keep following my Instagram at Tired and Thriving, all one word. And yeah, me and Arthur will see you next time. Thank you so much. Have a great, thriving week.